This podcast is brought to you by IWI. IWI has been knocking it out of the park lately with new products. Just this year, I've gotten the opportunity to try out the Masada Tactical and Masada Slim pistols, both in 9mm and both optics ready. The Zion pistol, which is their AR-15 pattern model, and the Gen 2 Galil Ace in 7.62 by 39. From first round hits at 500 yards from a 12.5-inch barrel in the Zion to summer carry with the Masada Slim, I'm freaking impressed. I can't get over how many changes and upgrades IWI has made from the first gen to the second gen Galil Ace. Most notably, it now has a free float handguard. IWI supports the shooting sports at a massive level, and they support the podcast. Next time you need a new blaster, I highly recommend IWI. This episode of the Three Gun Show is brought to you by Isotune Sport, the next generation of hearing protection. I love their Ear Pro. I wear the Advanced or the Caliber models when I'm shooting, which are in-ear, and I wear the Defy muffs when other people are shooting, like rifles. If I'm standing to the side, there's a muzzle brake or something like that. All of those models have their tactical sound control technology, which allows you to hear range commands and what's going on around you, but suppress gunshots. And one feature I had no idea I'd use so much is Bluetooth. I can be a little set in my ways, so I didn't think I needed Bluetooth in my Ear Pro. But with Isotune Sport, you can actually listen to music or a podcast and hear what is going on around you so you're not taken by surprise. Because of that, the Advanced not only go with me to the range, but they have become my go-tos for the gym and walking around my neighborhood. They've lasted countless 30-minute sessions in 134-degree heat in the sauna, and they're still kicking. My hearing is important to me, and yours should be important to you too. Thanks to Isotune Sport for supporting the shooting sports and sponsoring the show. Be sure to check them out to upgrade your Ear Pro. Welcome to the Three Gun Show. I'm your host, Dave Hartman. Today's episode is topical. There were some big announcements and revelations in the competition shooting world last week, and we've got friend of the show, Adam Maxwell, on to help us analyze what all this means and where we're headed. As you guys know, I'm passionate about the shooting sports, and this is where I think practical shooting is heading, so I encourage you to listen with an open mind. Now, there's 3 segments here, as I recorded them with visuals for YouTube as well, and so you can check those out on YouTube. Just search for The Three Gun Show. And thanks for tuning in, and please enjoy the show. So the USPSA recently had a post on participation. Max, did you see this?
I did, actually.
I thought this was like super interesting as far as the number of people that participate in each division in USPSA. So what we have here is January 2022 to October 2022. And so each of these is not like an individual person. These are entries into a match, and these are all USPSA matches. And it didn't really say in the post, but I'm assuming by the numbers here, this is club matches, sectionals, majors, etc., all together. So as you can see here, like 38% of the people that shot a USPSA match overall, 38% of the shooters is in carry optics division, and that's freaking huge.
Yeah, there's a lot going on this little graphic. And
there are.
That is definitely the standout. How many are participating in carry optics, and how many are participating in carry optics over the other traditional divisions?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, because I'm equally amazed at how low the limited and open numbers are.
Yeah. So the limited really surprised me because, for the longest time, limited has been like an incredibly popular division in USPSA. The production being 8.5% is kind of wild because, when I started shooting 3-gun 10 years ago, I got into shooting like a local club match, and production was huge. And that was like when people were shooting EAA witnesses and Glock 34s, and then Ben Steger was like winning everything with a Beretta 92. Like, production was huge at the time. It was super popular. Yeah. And now it's like the fourth from the bottom pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think and we were getting into the sport around the same time, and my scene, yeah, that was you shot production because that's where the heat was.
Yeah. Yes.
You weren't going to have an open debate. It was the tack optics of this sport.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Was production division, and limited had a lot of heat, but those tended to be seasoned competitors, and let's face it, older guys who were, they could afford the guns at that time. So they tended to be the more veteran, experienced competitors, and there was a lot of those too. But of all of us young bucks, like the production division was where you went for the heat. Like that's where the most athleticism was, for sure. And what's really interesting about this, because I've kind of digested this a little bit over the last couple of days, is all of these divisions, well, except for Limited 10. All these divisions were major divisions in USPSA at some point in the sport. Okay, so there was a time that single stack guns ruled the roost. 45 cal single stack.
I agree on single stack, but do you consider revolver like one of those? Was there ever a time revolver was?
I think around about that single stack era, there was a revolver nationals that people would shoot, Jerry Micklick's heyday.
You know what? Now that you mention that, that's probably right. Cause when USPSA started, the single stack was unproven technology, right? That's, you don't want a semi-automatic, you want a revolver because it works every time, that kind of thing.
That mentality was definitely around at the time. Yeah. But I feel like each one of these divisions has kind of had their time in the sun, and then they've kind of eclipsed as time has gone on. Limited and open have been the two mainstays for the longest. I think that's where the competition is the heaviest. But what that third division has been a little bit more of a contemporary snapshot in time.
Yeah.
So it was production. It was PCC for a minute.
I disagree.
Right, it's carry optics,
So I thought the same thing about PCC, but I think I have another slide here that I want to show if we're ready to move on. But I think the PCC craze was just that they were making the most noise because if you look at this slide here, so this is from a guy named Tim Yegla that I'm friends with on Facebook. He went and got some backup data from previous USPSA board numbers going back to 2017. And so you see there you got 0 for carry optics and PCC in 2017 because it didn't exist. And it looks like, I guess both of them were provisionary in 2018, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they came into 2017. My history's not that great on that.
I don't remember that.
If you look at that, PCC exploded because it exploded from 0, right? Exploded from 0 to this line, and then it flatlined. This is it right here on the brown line. If you're listening to the podcast, you can watch this on YouTube as well, and you can see it didn't really, it never was the primary. It never was first, and this one doesn't show Lim 10 or revolver.
It wasn't primary, but it was hot right now, and you got to remember that these stats are a reaction to what Three Gun Nation did the year prior. And for those 2 years, you couldn't get guys to shut up about their PCCs.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's the guy that owns the best Kia Rio out there. It's are there really that many Kia Rios out there? Yeah.
But I think it burned hot for a second. Kind of like the M14. If you go back in the military side, it replaced the M1 Garand and then it was gone.
I think you're absolutely right on the M14. It burned hot for a second, but it didn't burn as hot as everyone thinks it did. I think everyone's memory thinks it was hot, but if you look at this, it was still less participation than open. It never exceeded open. Whereas the other divisions that you were talking about, AMAX, look at open division, which is the green line, compared to production, which is the red line, in 2017. And then production has just gone down and down and down. It's almost the inverse of what carry optics is doing, which is the blue line. But then again, you see that the yellow line, which is limited, and I'm sorry, I don't know what this number on the left axis is. It's a number, but I'm not sure what the number is. I assume it's participation, but it doesn't exactly say. So if you look at it, it's pretty incredible to see that, those three divisions that you talked about, open, limited, and production, they were the hot stuff. Open has kind of stayed steady. seen a little bit of growth in the last like 2 years, but production and limited have definitely gone down.
Yeah. And it would be interesting, like if this graphic, I'm not sure exactly when production became a division in USPSA, but if we could extend it back that far, if we could see that growth cycle too, I think you'd see a lot more parabolic growth.
Yeah, for sure.
On production for sure. But yeah, I mean, the participation in carry optics has been astounding.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that, I've been beating the modified division drum for the entirety of this year and most of last year is I look at these numbers and I really do think like that presents or that represents the future of the sport, and if you're talking like the percentage numbers, Max, you were looking this up earlier. So if revolver was, let's see, 1.19%, this is also a post from USPSA. The current membership count between, or in October is almost 37,000. So like 1.19% is very little.
Right. But it's still a fairly large group of people. Like on that first graphic, you see there's 2,000 participants in revolver division. Mm-hmm. Well, 2,000 people want to participate in this division. They either want to pay $300 to go to a nationals, or they want to pay $20 a month to go to a club match every month of the year. I mean, that's still a representative group of people, and kind of what gets me wound up, because I kind of like some of these divisions on the bottom of the graphic here. Yeah. Like people are like, oh, well, that division needs to die. That division needs to die. Oh, well, guess what? It'll die when the revolver people decide it's done. All right.
Yeah.
The people who are shooting limited guns aren't the ones who decide when the revolver guys are done.
So I agree on that. The thing to remember though is this is not 2,000 people. This is 2,000 matches, right? So if there's one guy that shot 10, that's going to take it down to
as a percentage of membership. You're talking about 500 people.
Yeah. Okay.
Of all 500 of those people, well, actually it's more like 464, and say they all want to pay $200 to go to nationals. Okay. Well, that's $93,000.
I don't think that's exactly right.
It's not exactly right, but the point is that it's still, just because it's not a big group of people, it's still probably a group of people that we as an inclusive sport don't want to ignore.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree there. I don't think at that level it deserves its own nationals, but
oh no, neither does single stack currently at the moment. But if you put all of them together in a classic nationals,
right,
mm-hmm. You got yourself an event.
Now Lim 10 though, that's dumb. I mean, there's no one shooting limited 10 that's like, that's my gig. I get these big 2011 mags and I download them for limited 10.
Well, that's not necessarily true. There's some guns that don't fit into single stack or production division, like a bushing barrel 1911. Sold a lot of those over the years. So when we start looking at some of these other divisions, I think if you're gonna say that this section of the participation needs to change, it's like, then I have other questions like, does a production gun really need to hold 10 rounds? Are we excluding any viable pistols by increasing the capacity to 15? I don't think we are.
Yeah, on that one I totally agree. I mean, that's kind of out of the scope of what we're talking about here, but like I would 100% agree with you, and I think like Ben Berry has proposed like IPSC rules, which is 15 rounds, and that I feel like makes a lot more sense, because that covers like almost every gun I can think of that is in that production type, right? Because like the argument there is, well, the Glock holds 17, but like a Glock 17 or a Glock 34 holds 17, but a Springfield XD holds 16. Just guessing. I have no idea what they hold, but that, so that definitely could use some updating there. But I mean, there's all kinds of things that need updating. So if you talk about that, I think it's like Pandora's box, because production guns, like they kind of strayed a little bit from the initial reason for that division. A
little bit. But like our buddy Jeremy Gresham, he advocates for a classic division where you essentially put production, single stack, and all those together, and then you recognize major minor in that division. So you have different capacities, like as is currently in single stack. In single stack, shoot major, you can have 8 rounds. Minor, you can hold 10.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of thing, and you start to, because all these guns at one time were relevant in the sport and needed to be differentiated so that they could be competitive against each other. Well, now when they represent collectively, they represent less than 15% of the membership. Well, now it starts to make sense to maybe start to put them together.
Yeah.
But in Lim 10, so you look at a match like Classic Nationals, where you have only a few, you're drawing from less than 500 people for a nationals that are actually going to travel there. And, for a single stack, you're drawing from less than 1,000. And if they want to have a nationals, if they recognize Lim 10, they get the heat from limited division to show up to the match.
Yeah, see, that's a good point.
All right. Now people will take issue with that and say that we're artificially crowning a champion there. Oh, okay. But if on the major match side, if we needed those people to show up to have an event, I'm not going to throw shade at limited or Lim 10 if Lim 10 is the difference between having a Classic Nationals and not having a Classic Nationals.
Well,
people in the sport want to shoot those other guns. I would say let them shoot their other guns that one weekend a year.
Okay, so I think that power factor should be completely done away with too, because I think it's like an antiquated 45 because they don't make a 46 argument. But if you bring that up to like hardcore USPSA shooters, they really cling to the my vis, my power sort of thing. It's really weird. I have no idea why. But so Dylan Easley had an interesting comment on this chart that Tim shared. And he said, I requested further info and found that a large chunk of limited was limited minor, nearly 1,100 more than limited major. I assume this is new and casual shooters who want to run their 9mm pistol without having to reload at 10-round intervals. Outside of open, major power factor is virtually dead. So I think he makes an excellent point there. And it also goes into what you were saying about production being hamstrung at 10 rounds. So it might be a case where if they remove that hamstring, then there'd be better participation in production rather than limited. But that's, again, outside of the scope of what I want to talk about here. But this guy right here has like the perfect my vis argument. But then Ken Nelson jumps in and he says to Dylan, correct, limited minor was probably new folks who don't own a zillion mags for their high cap plastic service pistol. That's my usual recommendation to first timers. Skipping because it gets into defensive use. And then he says, if the remaining primary use for major power factor is testing technique, then make it hurt 180 power factor or whatever is safe, which doesn't sound like a nice Saturday morning. And then, yeah. The biggest point that Ken makes is, of course, maybe there's no need for a rule change. It looks like it's dying on its own.
Well, ultimately, that's what does a lot of it in. I can go either way on major minor. As a hardcore enthusiast, I enjoy the aspect of the strategic aspect of the game of major versus minor. If you could really do well one way or the other. So I think it can be an interesting component of the game, but like I was discussing in private messages about limited optics and what that should be. Somebody asked me if I thought we should recognize major minor and limited optics, and currently they recognize major minor in that sport, and so there has to be that. So the sport as a whole has to decide if they want to do major minor, but I do think it makes the sport artificially expensive right now, which is like I find the strategy of it interesting, but right now in 2022. I think it makes the sport artificially expensive. Ammunition is already expensive. It's already, and people have always complained about the cost of ammo forever, but it's when the sport already has that barrier of entry for participation of the cost of a consumable, to now incentivize using a more expensive consumable if the goal is really participation, then using niche calibers probably needs to go away. I'm less passionate about running 40 out of town than I am 9 major. I don't think it's responsible of us as a shooting sport to encourage people to shoot a sport that is wildly outside of Sammy spec. I don't think that's a good idea. I think
yeah.
It's dumb.
So I agree.
Application.
I agree on that, and then get rid of major power factor, and then it eliminates it. But that's
right.
Unfortunately,
right.
that's way outside of the scope of what we wanted to talk about here.
Yeah.
But the point is that like participation in carry optics is huge. I think people should pay attention to that because that is the industry, right? That is where the industry is at.
Right.
And so
and like, look at my local club match that I show up to on a Tuesday. I look at this graphic and it's everybody shooting carry optics, a couple guys who have open guns shooting open guns, and then my club match has 20, 25 people show up. So there's those guys, and then there's maybe a handful of some of these other guys. There's maybe a couple people with production guns. There's maybe 1 or 2 people with single stack guns, depending on if that's me or not that night. There's maybe 1 or 2 people with legit limited guns. But like when I sit and think about it, at my local club, vast majority of people are showing up with carry optics guns. That is who is driving the sport right now. Those are the people that are paying $5 a week to USPSA to run the sport.
Thanks again for tuning into the show. We have 2 more topics left, but during this brief intermission, why not subscribe to the 3 Gun Show in Apple Podcasts or whatever app you use to listen to the show and leave a review on the platform. I read every review and I greatly appreciate you taking a few minutes to write one. Back to the show. All right, and some interesting comments have surfaced on threads on Facebook, which I don't recommend going to Facebook that much, but if you do, definitely do it for the comments. But obviously Carry Optics is the biggest division here, so that brings out all the people that have their affinity division, and then of course other people with different axes, different unrelated axes to grind come out of the woodwork as well. So one of the local guys in Wyoming here reposted this post from USPSA without comment, and there were comments on his. And then Mr. Green here, had an interesting comment saying that 3 of the 8 divisions make up about 6.5% of submitted results, which I thought that was super interesting because then the 4th from the bottom is about 8.5%. So it really sort of like slices the pie really thin down there. Then Mr. Black here says, now multiply that by 2.5 and you have an idea of how much cash was made. That to me kind of sounded like an argumentative comment. And then Mr. Blue here says, that's only $420,000. Now add classifier fees onto that as well. So I think what they were trying to get at, if I can just kind of interpret their comments, is that USPSA is making too much money. However, it's not like someone is putting a gun to your head and making you pay for nothing. Like, you are getting a match out of this. You're getting like a rule set. You're getting a match. You're getting a match experience, whether it's like a club match at your local. There's a reason for people to come because USPSA has brand recognition. And then there's, the major match experience where people put on stages. There's professional, or not professional, but there's a higher level of range officer. There's dedicated range officer staff. Like I as a capitalist, to see things like this from the gun community, and it just makes me cringe. It's like, I thought we were supposed to be the ones that were okay with making money in an honest way.
Yeah, I mean, they're providing a good and a service, and in exchange they have some fixed costs. When people get butthurt about paying into an organization like this, I kind of think back to Denzel Washington in American Gangster, when
you would,
explaining blue magic, and Pepsi, that's a brand name. All right, when you buy Pepsi, you're getting, all right. When I buy Red Monster, I have an expectation of what's in here. Now with a match, for it to be called a USPSA match, it has to meet specifications. And so when people show up to a USPSA match, they have an expectation for what's going to be there, how it's going to be run, what the range commands are going to be, what the rules are going to be, and how the targets are going to be scored. You can have matches outside of that, but they have this model and they're trying to get it so that when you show up to USPSA in Arizona, it's the same as it is in Pennsylvania. And what I think a lot of people don't see behind the scenes of some of this stuff is the hard fixed costs of running some of this stuff. Having a legit website, even as kind of basic as USPSA's is, it is night and day better than, I'm sorry, USSL, United Shooting Sports League. Their website sucked and they knew it, but they couldn't generate the revenue to get it to what it needed to be.
It's expensive to have someone work on that. Like there's a full-time person that's dedicated to working on the website. Now
it's expensive.
You may be, biased one way or the other on the quality, but those of us that remember the pre-practice score days, it's not that bad.
Right. And even practice score has hard costs, and they ask you to join because it costs to run it. So, and then there's, keeping track of, putting on a series, putting on a national, putting on local matches that lead into state matches, that lead into regionals, that lead into nationals. Okay. All this administration takes people's time and it costs money. And then there's the process of training and certifying ROs. I, for one, am kind of tired of showing up to matches, outlaw matches in our sport, and getting people who aren't using the proper range commands, aren't running stages the same way. I don't like seeing fault lines on the ground that can move, or watching the course get modified over the course of a weekend. These types of things are regulated and monitored in an organization like USPSA because they're trying to create a consistent flavor of product.
Yeah, I think there's tons of examples out there. Like I've shot matches that are not like pistol matches that are not USPSA, and you'd be, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't be, Adam, because you've probably done the same. But a lot of people, especially the people that comment on stuff like this, it's like if you haven't shot outside of USPSA, it can get really, really garbage, like really, really bad. Like dudes making up rules for their own pistols and stuff like that and their own divisions and stuff. It's crazy. So to say that, like, it's not beneficial to have a consistent product or that they don't deserve my money. It's like, well, if that's the way you feel, I mean, maybe go fishing or something like that. But even then there's, different lakes have different feels to them and you can choose your different lake. But like years ago, Amax, when I was doing a bunch of obstacle races, like, they were super popular at the beginning. And so they were put on by everybody, and everybody had a different idea of what they should be to various levels of success. And it got to be to the point after a few years, we would only run Spartan races because it was consistent. They were, they were nice to you. It wasn't unsafe. Like they did like legitimate things to make it a good product. And I think that's what you can expect from like an actual organization. Yep. I'll give you another example, and you can relate to this one, Adam. The first time I went to a 3-Gun Nation match was the Nationals at what's the range in
Tulsa.
Oklahoma? Tulsa. Yeah. What is that called?
USSA.
USSA.
Yep.
Yeah. So, first off, like that range was awesome. Like the berms were all grass covered and mowed and everything. But 3-Gun Nation did a really good job of making all the walls one color, all the netting and the fencing that goes in between those walls, one color. The start tables weren't just some random start table that they pulled out from behind a shed that had been rained on for like 3 years and was rickety and stabbed you and you got splinters. Like it was a consistent, looked like a professional event. And that's the kind of event I prefer. I prefer to go to.
Probably underappreciated component of 3-Gun Nation that not many people saw is, they had those things about them. And they had it figured out because they were a road show. They were trying to bring the same thing to multiple locations. So they had it figured out in their budget for abandoned barrels. Yeah, they were all the same because they had it figured out. They could go to Home Depot, buy the same Rubbermaid trash can, and they had a specific one that they wanted to use. They'd buy 12 of them or however many they needed, and that was what they used. And then their walls, they had figured out they could make them for $2.50 a wall, whatever they were. They bought this much 2x2, and they were out there cutting them up and making them right before the match. So they were making something very consistent. Three Gun Nation did some things horribly wrong, but they did some things right.
Yep.
So, and another thing that they did right when they brought a match to your town, because I hosted them I convinced my club to host them. They brought a range officer class. So everybody who was going to be a range officer at that match, day before the staff shoot, they sat everybody down. Rob Romero ran through the whole thing. So everybody was on the same page. What we're doing, here's the rules, here's how we enforce them, this, that, and the other thing. It was about 60-70% of the process to go through for USPSA, but everybody was on the same page, and they were very good at producing a very consistent product. Mm-hmm. And I would like to see, especially as we want our sport to continue to be legitimized as an athletic competitive sport, as we want to appeal to sponsors, and have higher and higher stakes prizes to compete for, to attract and encourage higher level talent. These are the kinds of things our sport needs to do. Otherwise, it is right where it's going to stay.
Yeah.
For long.
Yeah, I agree. And, we're looking at the chart of USPSA membership statistics. There's almost 37,000 people as of October of 2022, as we're, 12 days ago as we're recording this. But that should be much higher. Like there's how many millions of gun owners in the US, and mm-hmm. a lot of them are younger, and providing an opportunity for people to shoot, I think, is a good thing. And then getting out shooting matches, of course, is a good thing. I'm completely biased. I've based my entire life and livelihood off of it. I really think it's one of the best things on the planet, and the more the better. So mm-hmm. yeah, but don't look at memberships as a bad thing.
The more structured our sport have been the times where it was the most prosperous. And recently, and some of it has declined around the COVID-19 stuff, and it went a little bit more outlaw. We can see what that did as that structure went away. Okay, well, how did participation do? How did level of sponsorship do? The biggest prizes we ever had to compete for in the sport was when our sport was organized and consistent in presentation and officiation.
And by our sport, you mean
multi action shooting.
Okay.
Action shooting sports. Three gun was the biggest it was when Three Gun Nation was doing it. USPSA is the biggest, action shooting pistol sport there is and has been for a long time.
Yeah, and I think politics plays a lot into how much we can grow, but I feel that we can do more together than we can when we're fragmented.
Oh yeah. I mean, a ton of wind went out of the sails when we got shadow banned from social media in 2020. When that kind of content was gone, 2020, it was big around the election stuff that year.
Yeah, dude, it's been a long time. Trust me.
Well, yeah, but it culminated. I mean, it got more extreme in that time period. People like me stopped participating in it. By and large. I mean, I participate in social media 80% of what I did before that. And they reflect in the sport, because our sport, we need people, we need a community, we need people to talk to each other and interact with each other outside of the actual event, because the event is one day. People's interactions with each other are 7 days a week, 365 days a year. When our community was talking to each other, and we were listening to podcasts, and we were looking at YouTube videos, and we were talking to each other about them, that's when the sport was most vibrant, in and around when we had some of those bigger prizes and bigger things. But as the bigger prizes left, some of the talent left the sport. And then as we were less able to talk to each other, the sport took another step back.
Adam, in other Red Dot news, Red Dot pistols are completely taking over all the shooting sports. Is the most popular in all the world right now, in tactical, in carry. Now it's getting to be that same way in shooting sports. And more proof, the Tactical Games has announced that they are allowing red dots in all divisions except for Elite Division.
Yeah, I would say one of the least optic friendly sports traditionally has now embraced optics. It's amazing.
Yeah, this is interesting. So this is reading a statement from Jared Halbert, the owner of TAC Games, and he says there was an in-person vote before a stage at the championship within the elite division, and the large majority voted to keep with iron-sighted pistols. To make this as clear as possible, red dots are allowed in intermediate men's and women's, tactical men's and women's, 40-plus men's and women's, 50-plus men's, and team divisions. Red dots are not allowed in elite men's and elite women's. I will be following up here with a list of blah, blah, blah. As stated before, I voted for red dots in elite. So, so the good thing about Jared is like he's a competitor as well. So he has other people run these votes. And I appreciate that about him. Before I get your reaction, I just got to point out that as with all things, this is why we don't have nice things. One of the very first comments on there is from Mr. Orange here, and he's being a chicken little. So what you are saying is that with the addition of dots to pistols, pistol targets just got smaller, or shot presentation will be much more will be more difficult. And I laughed and laughed and laughed because if you read the statement, we've got it on the screen here. If you're watching this on YouTube, nowhere does Jared say that. It's just the craziest binary thinking that can possibly happen on the internet. It's like if I say, man, Amax, I really love vanilla ice cream cones. And you just go, well, you don't like chocolate? Like, no, man, I like all ice cream.
Chocolate's delightful.
Yeah. Why don't you like cheesecake? Like, we weren't talking about cheesecake. We were talking about ice cream.
Not even a dairy product.
You don't like spoons? Like, no, man. I like spoons. Just it's an ice cream cone. I don't need a spoon.
Spooning, all of it. I'm a fan.
So silly, but I thought that was hilarious. So I just had to bring that up. But I did just check. I actually screenshotted that because I knew I wanted to talk to you about it. But I did just check before we got on the show here. It's now up to like 217 comments, and like almost all of them are positive. So it's just one of those, like, everybody, maybe it's not a good thing that everybody can state whatever's on their mind sometimes, but gosh dang it. That's yeah. So anyway, TAC Games, red dots are now allowed on pistols. Pretty crazy.
Well, I don't pretend to know much about tactical games, but what I get out of that statement is it would have been unilateral pistol dots, but they asked the pros, and the pros all looked in their holsters and saw the iron-sighted pistol that they spent a lot of money on and said, yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everybody else can have one but you.
So I'll go back and ask, I'll ask Jared if I can mention that he told me a little something behind the scene. We had a couple DMs before I published this. So I'll make sure I have permission, but I'll tell you right now, since we're not recording this live, or we're not doing this live, but he said that the sentiment was that they wanted to keep the difficulty in the division. Hey guys, real quick, I want to add a little bit of context to that quote from Jared there. His follow-up text was this, quote, seems like most in elite think a dot will make the shooting too easy and prioritize fitness too much, end quote. So I just wanted to add that little bit of context there that you won't hear in the rest of our discussion, but I thought you should know it. There can be difficulty with dots, and it doesn't just mean like making smaller targets or putting them away, farther away. It's just like things become faster. And one of the things that I appreciate about the tactical games is that they actually look at hit percentage because, you know, they're a completely different sort of scoring system than USPSA or 3-gun. So they look at like hit percentage, right? The number of hits that were made on target, and then adjust the difficulty of the targets for the next match. And so if the targets are getting too easy, they make them harder. And if the targets are getting too hard, they make them easier or less difficult. How about that? So I think that they put a lot of thought into the targets and the target placement and what they want like the hit percentage to be. And so for a whole division to say like, oh, we just want it to be harder. It's like, there's other ways to make stuff harder than just not allowing dots. Yeah, it's kind of silly.
And, you know, welcome to my life. But, you know, when I hear that, what I hear is what jumps out to me is like, you got to consider the source. Who are they asking?
Yeah.
They're asking bodybuilders.
Well, so I actually thought about the same thing. And from my perspective, and like I don't know all the names that are on the list of tactical games, but the people that are now in elite division to me seem like, I wouldn't say bodybuilders. I think that's the wrong term, but I think that they're like hard chargers. A lot of them are CrossFitters, and they either come from the tactical world or the CrossFit world, and they're not necessarily shooters. So I don't think they know what they don't know in that case.
Yep. I probably misused that term, but that sport is drawing heavily from people who work out and want a contact sport to play.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily shooters who are looking for something more physically challenging. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point.
I still encounter the people who are like, "Oh, we need to teach guys irons first before we teach them dots." Like, no, that's stupid. So, there's no logic in that other than tradition.
Yeah, so I personally thought that way when I started shooting. Like, I shot iron sight rifle, and my thing was, I will graduate to an optic when I learn iron sights, and that was really, really dumb. I spent like way too much ammo effing around with iron sights, and it's like it's not like it's that hard. Like it's simple but not easy, right? Just like everything else that we do in shooting. So as long as you understand like the fundamentals of like how to align the sights and everything, why not just go straight to the division that you want to shoot, or that you ultimately want to shoot, or add a dot or add an optic? Like, life's too short to screw around with iron sights. Ooh, write that down.
Well, and like the two don't translate. Like you aren't learning anything with iron sights that's going to hinder you, or you're not knowing how to do something with optic. Whenever I hear that phrase, all I hear is, not my dad specifically, but a dad, with telling their 12-year-old kid, "I just bought you this deer rifle, and you're gonna use it a little bit while I save up to buy you a scope."
Yeah,
you have a scope when you're 14.
Yeah, and
right?
if I'm
you're gonna start driving, you can have a new one when you're 18.
If I'm like real honest with myself, like that's probably what I was doing. Because at the time, I mean, we're talking 12 years ago. Like I definitely stretched to build that first AR-15, and I was shooting steel case. So if that tells you anything, so and I don't even, I don't know what like, I mean, I bought a used optic. Like that's where I was when I graduated to actually shooting an optic. So yeah, I totally agree. I think that's where it's at. And I don't know, I'm just in a completely different mindset right now. And I don't know, years ago I watched the Art of the Precision Rifle, the Magpul video. Do you remember that? And Todd so amazing. And Todd Hodnett said, what are you laughing about?
I'm laughing about him drawing on the door of his pickup truck.
That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, man. I was like, dude, that guy doesn't give a shit. But no, that was totally cool. But yeah, so one of the biggest takeaways I got from that one is like, if you care about like a hunt, if a hunt means a lot to you, you need good glass. And if you can't afford good glass for your hunting rifle, for your sniper rifle, for your coyote rifle, it's like, get one good optic and change it to all three of them. And he said, like, a zero, there's no voodoo in a zero. It's like easy to get. And I always thought like, okay, well, that's not true, because I remember what an ordeal it was to go to the range. I didn't have a car. I remember what like an ordeal it was to zero a scope. I didn't know what I was doing, but now that I have those skills, I have my own car and I have a range membership, those things are really easy to do. So yes, I totally agree, Todd. Like if you can only afford one good scope, get that one good scope, swap it between all your rifles. And, that's obviously the way to go. But yeah, I think it's short-sighted to think that dots aren't going to be in that division at some point, and might as well just rip that Band-Aid off now.
Yeah, and give people what they want. People want to shoot those guns. I mean, the sales numbers don't lie. That's what guns are getting made. That's guns are getting bought. We, as a sport that is trying to create the context for people to play with those guns, we got to create the world that they want to play in.
Yep. Yeah. So I have a bunch of pistols on my desk right now. I won't show you, but every one of them has dot capable. The only pistol I have that is not dot capable is my TAC Ops gun, because I bought that before it was a thing. all IWI pistols come dot ready now. What was that? Are you allowed to tell me that stat on the Glock MOS? Their numbers, their pistol numbers.
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Oh, okay. Maybe that was someone else, but it's the pistols that are sold with MOS versus not sold with MOS capability.
Oh, it's astounding.
Like it's far outnumbers.
Like the day is quickly coming that you won't be able to buy one without an MOS plate.
100%. Like I think that the only reason that they still make them without MOS plates is that there's the California registry, and so they still make stuff that's on the registry. So like, why not just ship them everywhere? Oh, I remember who told me that story now. I don't know. God damn it. I got to ask a bunch of people for permission to talk about them. Just assume if you ever speak to me in a social environment, I'm going to talk about you on the podcast.
Tip, if you don't want Dave to talk about something, you need to preface with off the record.
And write down what was off the record so I remember. I have a bulletin board behind the camera here. But yeah, so the guy I was talking to is an optics salesperson, and he said that the dealers that he sells to say that they can sell a pistol that is dot ready to someone that does not want a dot, but they cannot sell a pistol that is not dot ready to someone that does want a dot. So if it's not dot ready, you lose the sale. So that's like the way the whole market is right now.
Oh, exactly. And like I still shoot a lot of iron-sighted pistols, but one, I like the guns and I'm an enthusiast, but also I have to teach and be able to talk to the transition. So I go back and forth to remain relevant on both, but like you're not missing out on anything using our dots. It made something hard easy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I totally agree. It makes it so much easier. So there you go. Red dots are now allowed in TAC games, except for one division, which is the elite division. And that's okay because, they asked the shooters what they wanted. But I predict that eventually every division will have dots. But there you go. Dots rule, man.
Dots are officially tactical. Who knew?
Since I've been talking about the tactical game speed and agility training, I've had a lot of questions about the programming. So figured I'd answer a couple here. Yes, it's designed by an actual person. The program just shows up on your phone via the Tactical Games training app every day, so you know right what to do when you get to the gym. And the goal is to help improve your change of direction and increase explosive movement on stages while protecting your joints and strengthening your tendons. While I'm a huge fan of the TAC games and will likely shoot one of their matches in the future, the speed and agility program that I'm currently doing is designed specifically for practical shooting. That means 3-gun, USPSA, carbine matches, exactly what we talk about here on the podcast. Join me and the other listeners of the show that are on the program. There will be a link to the program in the show notes at 3gunshow.com, and thank you to the Tactical Games for supporting the show. The 3-Gun Show is proud to be a part of the Firearms Radio Network. If you like this type of content, help us grow the show and the shooting sports by sharing with a friend. Just open the podcast app you're using right now and hit that share button. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the range.